Going? Yep. Hey, thank you. Thanks for coming out. Hey, you, shut up. I know you. I can get away with it. All right, thanks for coming out. This is going to be interesting for all of us. We've got three fantastic panelists. Four. I'm sorry. No, I was half done, or 3/4 done. We have three fantastic panelists in front of you, and I guess a fourth up there on Skype. And we've not done this before, and those of you who have been here will realize that we can barely get by with simply talking. Now we're trying to talk and add, live, we're trying to add something on Skype. So we'll see how far this goes. If it works, fantastic. If it doesn't, oh well, we tried. And it's the software SIG, so what better place to try beta products. That said, I think I have to do a blurb on the forum.
Yes.
So, okay, Shirish is going to do this. Do you want to do the blurb?
No, but do you have a slide?
I don't need it. I can make it up. So this is this SIG comes to you by way of the MIT Enterprise Forum, and I would only be saying this. I wouldn't be saying this if Amy weren't here. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, the forum is great. The MIT Enterprise Forum is a fairly large organization. I think most of you already know about it. This special interest group, and by the way, Ainsley, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Very cool. This is great. No feedback. Cross fingers. So the forum's a fairly large group. This is one small piece of it. I know when I started in town 20 years ago or so, I would go to the various startup events, and now the Concept Clinic and the like, and I think those are all going. And since that time, the forum has added a number of programs like the 10250 program, a bunch of other SIGs or special interest groups. This one happened to catch not only my fancy, but these guys and Mike as well, and some others. And so we've been at this for 9 years, or 8 years, and we welcome others to join us after you've sort of seen the programs and hopefully like them. But this is a sort of our little corner that is really neat, and I think that all of you in the forum encourages us to have you all go out and try other forum events. Obviously, we like having you here and hope you'll keep coming back, but it's a pretty diverse offering. I know I personally don't like some of the events. They're almost too networking oriented. This one is sort of a no BS environment once we get going. Or there's BS, but it's of a different kind, at least once we get going. And that's what we're about to. So with that introduction, and Amy's not shot me yet. The only other thing I'll say is there'll be there's live blogging going on. You can't see it, but next time, hopefully, if this works, we'll get that piece going as well, and hopefully have questions from the audience. We prefer you actually pay attention to what's going on here, but if you want to put questions in, we're going to try to make that possible through the live blogging, and maybe Amy can help us with moderation if she doesn't quit. With that said, let me introduce Shirish, who's going to do his thing. Introduce the panelists and get us going.
I guess everyone knows that we're a software SIG. So just a little bit of what's coming up. Next month, we're going to do event on innovation, something around innovation. Hopefully at Babson. So it's going to be different venues. So stay tuned. Make sure that you watch where it is. I think Babson has a center in downtown, so we're going to do it downtown. But it'll be in the email, and please stay tuned. It's going to be innovation, and there will be one MIT guy who is really, really great in innovation. And we'll have the podcast segments up before that event. So hopefully you'll have, listen to him and come to the discussion. To start off the event, what we'll do is we'll go to the room and just one sentence, who you are and why you are here, so that the speakers will have an idea of what you're trying to get out of this one. So we'll start from this corner. Just in one sentence, who you are and why you are here.
My name is Mark Kuhlman, and I have a startup in
Mark Belf from the business school, interested in starting an app, not sure what the next.
Greg Pierce from North Star Insurance. We're a new sponsor of the MIT Enterprise Forum. This is my first time coming to the software SIG. I want to just check it out.
Okay. Jim Geisman. I have a consultancy called Software Pricing Partners that does just what its name says, and I used to run the startup clinic for about 10
Chris DeShanes. I'm a founder of This SIG, so I'm here to just help out if needed.
Michael, yeah.
Mike Oglow, a co-founder in a software and database management system, been helping them around the first rounds, and now I'm sort of an ambassador to them. It's my son-in-law and daughter's primary operation.
Well, Kelly Idika, I'm a staff member at MIT Lincoln Laboratory, and I am interested in just seeing what the city is all about.
Did we extend it?
Maybe.
My name is Victor Hadmi. I'm a speaker, and I'm speaking about the self-confidence and control appreciation. And glad to see you guys.
I'm Eric Smith. I'm the founder of Keystone Power Systems. We're actually a hardware company, but I'm in the process of building my team, so I want to hear the presentation.
John Mason, I own Boston Labs, and I'm also here to get some guidance on team building.
Stacy Galala, I'm a partner at a Android development organization that has rolled out 30 plus apps in the last year.
Srini Rao, here just curious about the entrepreneurial process.
Shabar Bart, I'm a Indiana alumna, and I'm in the process of putting together a team for a startup working on video and news.
I'm Joe Bates. I have a startup that just got some Navy money, and I've got to grow the team.
Venkatesh Chare, a startup developing assistive technology.
I'm Bill Collier. I'm a lawyer at Ian McCutcheon. It's a law firm in downtown Boston. So I'm trying to help you guys to start business and grow your business from a legal perspective.
My name is Patrick Unesco's involved in a small startup named Swipe, which was acquired by a large company called Nuance, and I'm trying to figure out what to do next.
Welcome.
My name is Frank Wiggins. I have a concept, and I'm trying to figure out whether or not we're going to make it into a startup.
I'm Norm Knight, and I've got a prototype of a mobile app that connects to course catalogs around a open source community quality student. And I'm actually looking for business help to try to evaluate how I can monetize it.
Jack Eggleston, I'm a co-founder of Rainbank, which is a water software company.
I'm David Fulstrom. I'm a private equity asset manager. I'm very interested in just kind of entrepreneurial inspiration at this point.
My name is John Chen, and I'm a first-time entrepreneur. I'm here to learn from everybody and hopefully learn how to manage startup team.
I'm Shiju. I'm from Vertex Pharmaceuticals. First time to be here. Entrepreneurs entrepreneurship.
My name is Lane. I'm at I just company to check out products.
My name is Steve Garone. I'm the founder of a social media and inbound marketing company. I'm also an industry analyst, software industry analyst, and a member of the marketing and CEO services committees of the MIT Enterprise Forum. And I'm here to hear what you guys have to say.
My name is Georgi, and I'm present to host the Political Institute Leadership Club, and I just want to come and check the event and see if we can do something like similar to Boston.
I'm Gene Chang. I do product management and product marketing consulting, and my hobby is working with early stage companies.
I'm Jeff Cristoforetti. I'm an attorney at Bateman Watkins, one of the sponsors for the event. I work with a group that's dedicated to working with emerging companies, and I'm actually here to learn about the forming company stage because that's what I do every day, and it's just good to learn more from people that do it.
My name is Yoga. I'm an MBA student at Boston College, and I'm looking to start with startups, so I want to learn something about that.
My name is Ian Lamont. I'm the co-founder of Inventory. It's a mobile application for classifieds. We're about 6 months old. We have no money, but when we do, we're going to form teams. That's why I came here.
My name is Ben Birds. I do estimating for Schneider Electric. App development is a little bit of my side hobby, so just gaining some insight.
My name's Greg Dada, and I'm interested in iOS app development.
My name's Stefan. I sell culinary software for iOS, and I'm looking to grow the business.
So I'm not going to go through the bios of the speakers, so we'll dive right into the program. What we'll do, we'll start with Vinny, and then we'll go to Ansley and Young, and then we. So Vinny, take it over.
Sure. Should I go into talking about the stuff, or should I introduce myself?
I think your bios are here, so let's just dive in. Interesting time.
Your reputation precedes you, so.
Yeah.
So you guys know this. Starting a company is hard. Building a company, growing a company is hard. Now, I would argue that as your company is growing, it's much easier to keep it growing and to just, put money back in to grow the thing. But the challenge is in, taking a ship that has all these sort of big problems and sort of, papering over them, trying to get customers, keeping them happy, and, sort of charting the right course out and building what you're doing, building a company. And to do that, the hard part is, that task is made much easier if you have the right team with you. So at the end of the day, one of the biggest causes of failures of companies, especially at the early stages, is the quality of the team. There are some people out there who are able to, say, yeah, my ideas are good, that no matter what team will be able to pull it off. I'm generally not a believer of that. And if you're a strong proponent of that, we can discuss that on the side. But given that, my perspective is, how do you find the right person to build stuff with, to build that company with? And the quick answer is, it's in your network. It's somebody that, you're doing stuff with right now. It may not necessarily be that he will join you immediately, but he may know the right person. And so it's sort of, your inner circle that trusts you, that knows all your strangenesses. They will help you and give you the right contacts. So, like Shirish, for example, he's a great guy. He's got a lot of strengths, but he's got some weaknesses. I know I understand those, and if I'm actually going into sort of uncharted territories, I know how to deal with him appropriately. I know that in which cases he might be downplaying something, or which cases he might be actually getting really frustrated with things. One of the first company that I started was when I was doing my undergrad. Really great guy, I got along very well with him. But we had a small obstacle about literally a week or two after we started going in full time into it. We realized that we had competition that was funded. That had over $1 million of VC money backing them. And that was fine, we could have dealt with it, but the way that our personalities worked out, his beliefs and my approach to things, we had huge problems. Now I can say very simply that he thought he could do everything by himself. But, that's not really being fair to him, and it's, I should have been able to deal with it in the right way. So I would say that the ideal answer is someone that you've done some project with in the past, that you've done something successfully. You should ideally get them in the next company that you're starting. Now, that usually doesn't happen, so the question is, what do? Well, help at organizations like this, volunteer maybe, give talks so that people know you, people know that you're a trusted person, so that when you're trying to build your next organization, they will say, you know what, hey, I know him. And then you also, because of your loyalty to the group of people that are following you, will tell the strengths and the weaknesses. They'll say that, you know what, I'm doing this, I believe it, but the only reason I'm doing it is for this X reason. And that information, that genuine conversation is, I think, the most important, in my opinion, the most important thing in trying to find and build a team. There are a few examples of companies that I would argue in the old school hardware days, maybe, when you had a huge hardware company, you would have a huge upfront plan, and then you would just have to execute it, and you just get the best marketing person. But in today's day and age, where we are sort of reacting to a very quick and rapidly changing industry, marketplace, you need people that are sort of trying to figure things out with you as you're growing the company. In the first few months, you might have to care more about just launching a free service so that there's lots of people who hear about you. And then the next challenge might be, okay, how can you get some easy money? How can you use your brand recognition in this free world to sell a very different product? But now that you're trusted, you can sell this product for a lot more money. And how do you actually pull that together? It's a lot of different ways to do it. And I mean, I've got a lot of answers that we've figured out, but it's not been an easy process. So that's my 2 cents.
Now we'll go to
okay.
Nancy. Take it away.
Sure, no problem. Hey everyone, I'm Ainsley. I am from MIT. I graduated about 2 years ago. I've worked in the corporate world since graduation, and I also started a company. So I run a company called Tinfoil Security. We started it, we quit our jobs exactly a year ago, my co-founder and myself, and we started the company about 10 months ago. Since then, we've hired our first employee, we've gone through fundraising, we've been in an accelerator program, we've done a whole bunch of things. We've even moved out to California. Just to preface, every piece of advice that you get is bad advice until it's proven right. So take everything that you hear, from me at least, with a grain of salt. I'm just going to go into the fundamentals of how we started the company and why we left our jobs, because that was probably the most difficult thing we had to do with starting the company. My co-founder and I were both working in the DC area. We were both doing some sort of security work. I was doing security consulting, which is not what I planned to do when I first moved out there. After graduation, working in the government is very slow. I wasn't learning very much, and I realized that security is a lot of fun, but working for the government wasn't really my passion. And I realized that I wanted to do something that I'm passionate about. My co-founder was feeling the same way, where he graduated 2 years before me, or a year before me, so he'd been spending 2 years in the same job. His work was really interesting, but it was just way too slow for him. So we ended up working on side projects and realized that a lot of the side projects we were working on just weren't fun at all. And the reason why they weren't fun anymore was because we were focusing more on our regular jobs than actually focusing on the projects. So we ended up deciding that we wanted to go and do a startup. And the only way to do that would be quit our jobs and focus on it 100% of the time. So we left a year ago, and it's been a blast ever since. Doing something new. You're going to put on 1,000 hats every single day. You're going to be playing marketing. You're going to be playing biz dev. You're going to be doing development, front end, back end, design, every single scope, even if you are not technical. So be heavily prepared for that. So for us, we had a whole bunch of ideas after we moved from DC back to Boston. Boston was great for us. We already had a good network out there. So as soon as we moved back up to Boston, we threw up a whole bunch of landing pages. So we came up with 15 shitty ideas, threw up landing pages, threw them on Hacker News and Reddit and a whole bunch of other places just to see what would get traction. And our favorite was a security company, really redefining website security, which is what we're doing now, and it actually got the most traction. So luckily, it's the thing we are most passionate about, and it's also the idea that a lot of other customers wanted. So a lot of other people wanted the solution, and it's been a year since we actually launched our private beta, but some of the people who signed up on that beta list are now using the product, which is awesome that they've hung through for about a year. So for us, it was really making sure that we found the right market before even building anything. And so my co-founder and I, we're a great team because I'm not as technical and he's very technical. So kind of combining this together, we get along really well. We're really good friends. So since we've actually started building out the company, it's been a whole lot of changing really, really quickly. Just iterating quickly, iterating on the idea, for security consultants to come through. So that's how we came up with our ideas, and that's how we started. So.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Mian, and when it comes to building teams, I have to say that I probably made every mistake one could make when actually building a team, because I back-ended into starting the business by having a friend who approached me and said, hey, do you want to start a company together? I said, that sounds like a good idea, because I didn't want to go to business school, and so decided to do that instead. And then we kind of proceeded, and actually, the one mistake I did make was actually that we got along exceptionally well together. And as you know, as you spend time at the side of your desk or the side of your, at night, trying to work on an idea, that these ideas are something that you have such a great passion for, that it's fantastic to have a partner with you, and I had that partner with that same passion and dedication to trying to make the business happen. But there were mistakes that we made along the way. First of all, probably 2 years after he went online, he left to go to California and work for Seinfeld. And we didn't think about that when we were building our team, building the partnership. And so there were some issues that we had to deal with in terms of ownership structure that we didn't think about or anticipate. I think the other thing that I think about in terms of building a team that I had issues that I didn't really realize is that nobody had as much passion as I had for the business as I had. And so when I was thinking about building the team, I was thinking, oh, this team's going to be with me forever. And the fact of the matter is the team is not likely to be with you forever. And I think understanding that and accepting that from the beginning is actually a very freeing thing to do, because then you can really start thinking about the skills you need to do so. Another mistake I made when I think about building the first team that we had was about really focusing on what they did and how, the needs that we needed to address, but not probably spending as much time thinking about the fit and whether I could actually get along with this person in the long term, or sort of, through those hard nights and through all the grueling work that you go through and trying to move from something that's very ambiguous to trying to figure out how to make that product work or your idea work. And that takes a lot more in terms of being able to work with other people and talk through ideas and debate ideas through successfully. More so, I think, in the end, actually, than having a person who knows how to do it right. Another thing in terms of team building for me was sort of arrogance on my part, to be honest with you. So I think when it comes to team building, you really have to understand for yourself whether, in fact, you are ready to build a team, and is that team the team that wants do you want to be the man, do you want to be the boss, or actually are you actually interested in having people alongside you and help build the idea that you have? And to be honest, I was a little arrogant. I really thought I knew exactly what had to be done. And so the earliest people who joined the team with me were ones who I should have listened to better, so we could have gotten further along the path of what we wanted to do as a team. And I think it resulted in some friction too, because I wasn't very thoughtful about what I wanted from other people and what other people had to give me in turn. But with all that said, I think that when I think about where I was in the evolution of the company, in an earlier stage company, when you're pre-funding, pre-idea, pre-money, and actually the only thing you have available to you is time, I'd really focus in on things like finding people who have that flexibility, who have the ability to kind of work through ideas and don't have a very fixed way of doing things. I know that we ended up hiring people, like our first CFO was a person who's probably too big for the job, but we had really thought, oh, well, we're going to be this big at this time. And the fact of the matter is you need to have that person who can grow with you along the way and will be there to pay the bills, as opposed to thinking it might not be something that they should really be doing, because next thing you know, you'll end up having to sort of build a team to accommodate the company that you're going to grow into. I think that for me, actually, I'd be more interested in hearing what your questions are and kind of relay experiences. But there are lots of mistakes I made. I think there are lots of things that I've learned from, but I think the key to it really for me is understanding roles, expectations, and making sure, understanding the flexing that a person can have and whether they can flex according to the different stage that you are in the company. And as you think about that, make really smart choices, not only for the team so that your day-to-day can be very enjoyable, but also when you're starting to think about getting backing, they're backing you and the team and your chemistry and how well you get along as much as they're backing the idea. Because in the end, and that shows, and we were given feedback along the way from the VCs when we were pitching money that the chemistry didn't seem to be quite as apparent. And so it was something that was really important for us in the end to reflect on and kind of really think about how we could work more effectively as a team, because I didn't realize that that was as much, it wasn't just what we had to offer, but it was actually who the team was that was going to be putting it out to market and making it happen. So lots of things that we learned along the way, but it's a great journey for sure.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. When you introduce yourself and look into the distribution of group, I mean, majority of the biggest group, obviously, the founders, startup co-founders, obviously that bring you to this meeting. Actually, I give talks, here and there. Actually, next Saturday, I'm going to talk at MIT, talking about how to write business plan. So I typically give 2 talks. One is how to start your company, and how to write business plan, and also how to do fundraising. I mean, all these together, people heard from my talk before, is always an emphasis on team. This topic was, I really think it's a very interesting topic to bring up to talk about it, because, talking about how to build up your team. I don't think there's a fixed formula, what is to do. I mean, I think Min mentioned a great thing, is you're looking for someone share the passion. I mean, that's something you can't go wrong with. And I started my first company, that's over 10 years ago. And when I started, I actually had a couple of people together, interested to do it together with me. But when I read business plan, by the end, I started a company and nobody joined me. By the end, actually, none of those guys joined me. So I was so founder for the company, okay? So that's why I gave this talk. I always talking about people. Say, if you decided to do something, I mean, you got to do it, no matter what, okay? Whether they go with you or not. So that's really important part of it, because you decided to do something, you have that vision, you believe in yourself, you should do it, no matter what. And also during the time, you're really building your team. You got to understand, if you can have co-founders go with you, it's great, because you can bounce ideas, check balances, all that stuff. But sometimes you don't have that luxury. Also the first company actually later I built a team. Really people stick with me. I mean, we go through difficult times. I mean, we sold the company later. All that worked out good actually. Although I was so founder. Then I started this second company, the US Book Discount. Actually, again, me also mentioned, most time when you start, you're looking around, who is around you, who you know with, obviously. Your friends are the first one coming out, okay? Let's do something together. I go through similar things there. Through one of our friends, we're actually pretty close. So, and then we work on it through a couple of months, then I talk to all the others. I said, look, this doesn't work out. I have to talk to him. So I actually talked to him and said, look, I view our friendship is more important than business, okay? And I don't think it will work out. So I'd rather to cut it off and keep our friendship, okay? And it will out good because we are still friends today. Think about it, if we dragging along, by the end, we'll end up having, bad relationship, damage, the friendship we built for years, and then, the business wouldn't be successful either. So if you can build your team, I would say the earlier the better, because you have a chance to test it out. Okay? Some people you may think about, you're a good buddy, you play golf together, you do other stuff, may not be the real partner to do business together. So again, if you can start early, before you even form the company, it's a great time. You can unlock it. Because when you really form the company and you have someone join the team and you want to change that, it's much more difficult. So this is my 2 cents. And I really want to openly discuss with everyone on that.
Before we go into discussion, I just remember, we are videotaping and also audio recording. So by being in the room, you're consenting to both recording. So I guess not.
I think he meant that as a question.
So let me just start with a question. I think there is, in the set of questions that we have, one question I thought you guys might not have touched is, when do you decide you need a co-founder versus you need an employee versus a consultant? So,
when do you decide you need someone, or when is the time to start?
So when do you decide that you have a co-founder? Okay, you're going to say this person is my co-founder versus this person is my employee versus this person is my consultant.
I'm going to take the question slightly differently. When do you start trying to find the right people? You should be doing that all the time. If you're thinking you're going to build...
So okay, you found the right person, but how do you decide, okay, this person is a right person, he or she is a co-founder, or he or she is just an employee, or he or she is just a consultant?
So the way that I look at this is I would love to see as much of my responsibilities taken on by someone else. You know, the best thing would be I just sleep at home and someone else runs this company for me, right? So to me, it's a function of how much of those responsibilities is someone willing to take. Is someone really trying to be, you know, hopefully you've realized by now that it's very different being an entrepreneur versus being an employee. You know, an employee wants instructions from his boss, and he will do that. And so when I'm looking at someone, I'm basically trying to assess exactly where do they fit in. And it's a little bit less of a consultant. You know, I think about, are they trying to be just strategic and give you high-level advice? Are they able to actually execute? Right? And those are the guys who can sort of execute, make stuff happen, but are able to sort of take the initiative themselves, are the kind of people that I would love to have as co-founders. There's a little bit of function of timing and all those kinds of things in there. But at least that's how I do it.
For me, I would think that so the term co-founders has so much more weight to it than any other title. And actually, if you kind of just take a step back and say, you know what, co-founder is just another title, I think it can help demystify that a little bit. For me, I think, you know, whether it's a co-founder or a VP of marketing or a VP of finance or whatever you have, if you have another person who has as much passion and will care and worry about everything you are worrying about, that person, in my mind, would be a person I would turn to regardless of what their title is. You know, and so personally, I'd be a little careful or cautious about using the term co-founder, because I think what happens is you've got baggage, how much share equity that person should have, whether you're able to make, be more rigorous about whether you're going to let that person go or not. And so I think that term co-founder is something that we use very freely, very early, and I think that's something that, in retrospect, we didn't need to have done.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, everything equal, you got to be fair to the others, you know. Founder, co-founder, I mean, really, it's co-founder definition, you start something together. But you got to be careful on some of it. I see some people, you know, oh, that's my father-in-law, or this is someone who runs business being a successful CEO. They are typically not your co-founders, you got to understand, because you would rather put them as advisor, you know, versus as co-founder, because they don't fit. Because co-founder is really someone, you know, doing all the dirty work, you know, doesn't care about to get hand dirty, carry all the way together with you. I mean, those kind of people, I think, you know, would be qualified as co-founder. But again, obviously, co-founder has to be the company, you know, started with. You know, after you start up later, you know, that really doesn't fit in that category. So.
Yeah. I've seen companies, though, hire people, and then a year later, after they started and after they've had some amount of traction, they give out the title co-founder because it's what it takes to get that person into the company. You know, and so, you know, I'm with you where I think, for me personally, I think co-founder is a person who's thinking of what the concept is, how should it be morphed, how the product, how the business should be morphed, who should you pitch money, who should you pitch for, what's the position and the like. And I don't know if the title is as important as much for me.
Nancy? Ainsley?
Yeah, so I was lucky because I wanted my co-founder to be my co-founder. Just because we work really well together, we're good friends, and I knew that, you know, if we had to live together, I'd be happy living with it. Because, you know, there might be a point in time if you're bootstrapping that you may have to live with your co-founder. You know, you really want to start a team with people that you enjoy working with. As we start to expand our team, so we only started expanding our team after fundraising, and we really been looking for people who are smarter than us, just because we want to be able to continue learning. We want to be able to work with people who can think on their feet, who think much more quickly than we can, even though we tend to think we can think quickly. So we're just looking for really smart people who can learn quickly and keep building the team with us. And it's not that we're pigeonholing ourselves into roles because we're all doing everything. And I think that's important for the first 5 employees to understand, is that they're also going to be doing everything. Because, you know, you can hire an engineer and, you know, large corporations where you can just hire a new person because you got limited funds, you have limited equity. For us, it was really an even split of equity in the initial phase, and then working with our advisors and our investors to figure out exactly how to structure everything following that. But it's been interesting how we developed our team since. We actually started with a third co-founder, and after about a week, just realized that we were a better team, just us two individually, than with the third person. And I absolutely love the third person, but for the specific company we're working on, he just wasn't the best fit for the team. So it's interesting how team dynamics change, and a lot of people have co-founder issues. We want to find someone who you work really well with. Single co-foundership is really, really, really hard, and really big props if you can do it yourself. I personally am really happy I found a co-founder. So.
All right, so.
I have a question about the difference between the CEO role and the founder role. And I know when you start a company, de facto, I guess, you assume the CEO role in making all the big decisions. But sometimes there's a time where someone else has to come in. And I'm trying to understand what's the difference then between the founder role and the CEO role, and how you manage that kind of transition, if you maybe experienced it or if you know about it.
I'm a strong proponent of the founder being the CEO until, at least for us, my personal number is $1 million in revenue. Until you build the organization a little bit, because there's a difference. If you are getting a CEO, a professional CEO, they might be really good at building an organization, but they may not be good at figuring out what the right organization should be. So if you actually look at a lot of the lean startup, 4 Steps to Epiphany, a lot of that literature there, a startup is trying to figure things out. I think the founder in the beginning needs to have that role.
Our company actually, I was the founder of until we raised money, and then I stepped aside, and or actually CEO until we raised money, and then I stepped aside, and I was various senior roles throughout the organization. And for me, the reason why it was the right thing to do is kind of like, I think that there's that parable about, splitting the baby. I just wanted to make sure that the business idea would succeed, and I recognized that I didn't have the skills that it took at the time. So, this idea, I remember when I was interviewing for the team, we were interviewing for CFOs and VPs of marketing and VP of sales after we got all this money, and I would literally go and have an interview and say, tell me, what do you do? Because I didn't know what these different roles were. So I knew I wasn't particularly well suited to do so. And I think that it just, I think my passion for the idea of making sure that the business worked was something that allowed me to accept it. I actually am now the CEO of the company and the division, but that, I feel like I was really lucky in that the person who became CEO was fantastic to me. And so if you were to choose a CEO, you have to have a person who, because I've seen plenty of instances where the founder gets shut aside, you as the founder don't have the ability to influence the direction of the business. And so we just had a great relationship where he was really good at running businesses and building teams and building organizations and org structure and giving people titles and quarterly reviews and things like that that actually are really important to run a company, but I wasn't that interested in that stuff. I want to make business work. And so it is a tricky thing to do, but it was something that I think ultimately for our company worked.
So you were more focused on the product itself, and he was, or she, I don't know.
It was a he, yeah.
He was focused on the operational aspect.
Operations, sales, and so we would just sort of split roles, and I think that over time I actually ended up running almost all the departments except sales. And so I was kind of like the glue, because I knew what all the different impacts were. If this happens, this means that this will, this is what the technology can do or cannot do. Here's how we should think about marketing it. But I wasn't that interested in kind of running the company at the time.
Yeah, CEO, really very important role in the company. So if a founder can be the CEO, have that experience, carry that weight, it's great. Because I started first company with $10 million venture funding. I never run business before. For them to like me to be the CEO, carry that weight, it's always kind of very big risk. You know, I mean, but we agreed, you know, hire a CEO. So I was really happy to do that because if there's someone who has experience, you know, on my side, I can learn from him day to day. That's a great thing. I have no problem to do that, okay? But not necessarily to be the hire CEO to be successful. That's a very big risk for any company. We did hire one. I mean, they couldn't get along with my investors. We had to spend a big headache to get rid of him. So then I'm the CEO, so I'm not running the business about 10 years. So, I mean, I learned to go through that. So, I mean, anyone who start coming here today, I mean, really great. You know, you learn some experience from it. Because when I started, I never been a CEO, I have to learn on my job. You know, really hard. I mean, I don't have time to come to a seminar to learn something either. I want to go to business school, but I don't have the luxury either. So I have to learn on the job. So most of the time, you know, the VC funding come, they would say, okay, we have to hire a CEO, but that's a big risk to the company. Okay, everybody understands there's a big risk involved in that, whether it will come with it or not. So if a founder can be that role, it's really huge benefit to the company. And also, as a founder, whether you're a CEO or not, I really think you want to spread out the company. Doesn't mean necessary. I think most of the mature person, you know, start a company, you gotta understand, you know, you may not be the CEO to be there, but that's probably not really important. You still have a great influence for the company. I mean, the direction it goes, and also any startup will go through up and downs. You will find the founder play, you know, very important role in that terms.
Yeah. So for us, you know, it's kind of an interesting dichotomy of how you have to structure your company and when you have to hire a CEO. So, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for founders maintaining the executive roles because they don't know the company in and out. They know the product in and out. And eventually, you know, if you're starting off with a team of 5, and eventually you're going to grow into a large company, and eventually you're going to have to understand the market, you're going to have to understand the business, and you're going to have to understand the product, and how each of them are going to help one another, and how the product's going to change based off the market, based off the business, and exactly where you want to go with your next fundraising round, and everything else. So I think the founders have the in and outs of the company, and you know, we've seen some extremely successful founders become amazing CEOs. Check out Drew House from Dropbox, for example. He's doing an amazing job. He's doing an amazing job being the CEO, and he's flying all over the place. And he's great at maintaining, you know, care for Dropbox itself. There are some companies where all of the founders are very technical. They're not very good at the business, and they eventually come to the point where they understand they do need someone as CEO to take over, at least for marketing, for sales. So it really depends on where your strengths lie and what interests you, what causes you to get passionate about your company, about your product, and what's going to make you guys succeed. So it's very different based on who your founders are. But you know, I personally am a huge advocate of the founders maintaining control of the board, maintaining control of the executive positions, because they tend to understand the product the best.
Jim, you had something?
Yeah, you know, this talk about co-founders and CEOs and stuff like that, I haven't heard any comments about what the skill sets are. You know, way back when you needed to raise a modest amount of capital in order to bring the product out. There was a study done that said that you really needed a balanced team, that the odds of success were much better with a balanced team. You had a business person, you know, marketing salesperson, and a technical co-founder. And you know, given that the price of entry into the markets these days is so low, is that still true? Do you really care about having a balanced team when, you know, you can go like Stink for, you know, $100 grand, which you can almost put on your own credit card? Does a balanced team matter anymore when you're starting out?
I think the balance means something slightly different. There are, you know, companies today create, you know, do crazy things like create a product and their own channel by themselves. You know, on the other hand, there's a lot of business people or sales people that are very good at just direct sales or just one thing. So it kind of depends on, you know, at least in an early stage, I believe you want somebody who's flexible enough, and that's actually much, much more important, in my opinion, than balanced. I would also say you need someone who is comfortable talking to other people, no matter what. Having a team of, usually a lot of technical people they hate being disturbed.
I raised money a long time ago when you needed to have a balanced team because there wasn't enough, you needed the money to get the proof of concept to show that there was traction for your business. So my guess is you probably need that a little less if you can actually demonstrate, that there is traction or demand for the product or offering that you have. But in the end, regardless of when you get funding or when you want to scale a business, you absolutely need a balanced team. You cannot do everything yourself. I think that there's a lot more flexibility in hiring options than there were some years ago. Because back then, you had to woo somebody away from their job to join you. These days, people can work part-time. They can work as a consultant to you. They can work. They don't even have to be in the same building with you because you've got IM, Skype, and the like. So I think there's a ton more flexibility in kind of achieving that balance, and you don't have to do it with that full commitment of hiring a person full-time. There's a lot of try before you buy that I'm hearing about.
Yeah, I mean, when I talk about how to write business plan, how to run business, because one thing for sure for any business is changing. So, having a balanced team doesn't at different stage, because when a startup at early stage versus, early stage, really talk about how to develop prototype. That's really very important. I mean, you can have a very powerful CEO, VP of marketing, he probably doesn't play much role, sales guys. But when the company comes to later stage, when you have a product ready, obviously the sales marketing people play very important. So I would say that really goes by the stage of the company. So at different stage, you need a different kind of talent, and that need to be, balanced when the company goes by.
Ainsley?
So I'm understanding balanced team as balanced kind of positions and, balanced technical and marketing, sales and whatnot. If I'm understanding this correctly, I'm not exactly sure that everyone needs strengths to be very balanced. I think that it's important for you to be able to at least cover everything minimally. You have to be able to cover tech. You have to be able, if you are a technical company or biotech or whatever scope you're starting your company, you have to have some sort of expertise in what you're creating. You have to be able to understand marketing, or at least know who to go to ask for help. Understanding sales, understanding the general scope of everything is the most important thing. In terms of time balance, I do think that full-time is best if you want to create a company quickly. You can spend 5 years part-time building a company, but at that point, because there's so many companies coming out right now and so many people iterating, you can easily fall behind. Someone can come up, ideas aren't unique. If you're working on it, probability says that 5 other people are working on it too. The genuine benefit of being a startup and not so much corporation is that you can move quickly. And having the ability to actually work on a project full time is going to allow you to be much more agile than other competitors out there. So that's kind of in time balance. So it really depends on your definition of balance.
I just have a question. You talked about needing to have your team before you go for funding, but at the same time, in order to have a team, you often need to pay them. And you can't do that without the funding. So just wondering, where do you start? And how do you start building a team without funding? Or how do you get funding without a team? And how do you start figuring out that envelope?
Well, you've got something when you start off with, right? You've got equity. There's 100 different answers. One of them is find someone on day one who's willing to work without money and takes only half your company, right? And many companies have done that very nicely, and that's actually a really good way to do things. The other way is to work like a pig. Another answer that I've seen is take a lot of your savings or a bunch of your savings, outsource some stuff until you get to some point that is making a difference and then hire someone, or you're getting some revenue, then you can hire someone with less equity. It kind of depends on your situation. A lot of people have gotten grant money, right, to form somewhat of a team, and then they're seeing where the growth rate is, and then just keeping past the grant only the people that they like the most, and that becomes the core of the company. Some answers.
I'm trying to think about what so my co-founder and myself, we didn't pay ourselves anything except for cans of tuna and bags of M&Ms. And then we took that money that we had started to save up and doled it out, but it was really slow. So it takes a lot of, and then there was actually a person that we hired as a tech. He was an MIT student. We brought him in and called him our technologist, and brought him into our meetings with the VCs as our technologist and told him not to talk too much. But it was something. Well, he definitely did work for us, but he was not a person who was a full-time person for us at the time.
So in our case, my company is based on my PhD work, very heavy technology, software-based. We had prototypes, and we knew that we needed to spend a lot of engineering resources to get it to the market. I didn't want to get a business guy in the beginning because it didn't make as much sense because we needed to do the engineering side. While I was doing my PhD, there were some people who were sort of doing research. They were basically getting at least one person equity and paid exactly a grad student stipend, right? And while now I needed that money, I was working essentially nights and weekends doing consulting to be able to pay the other person and myself so that I could survive. And we did that for basically 2 years. And then, got things off the ground.
Yeah, so it's like, other two handling mindset. Really depends on the type of business you are, because if you do something, very heavy technology and oriented, I mean, again, if you yourself have that technology, you don't need other people, that's a different situation. But, also you hire some people, even they're not your co-founder, you want to have, good equities. You want them to be, because you want them to stay with the company and you need that. So that's all balance. But on the other side, if you have some other open platform business, I mean, relatively less oriented, say, this key person really need to have huge amount of equity versus other, then that's play a different role. So I really think that depends on type of business you do.
And Steve?
Sure. So I think, for us, while we were going through our first fundraising round, the team mattered, but it was more of the founding team that our investors cared about. So, how we presented ourselves, our own abilities, what we wanted to learn, and how much we had learned since we started the company. We actually didn't incorporate a week before we got our first money in. And that was right before we joined the Accelerator program. So we had been going for about 2 months, living on our own cash. It was just us two. And I think there are a lot of ways that I've seen other companies do it, either giving equity to employees, just large chunks of equity, anywhere between 2 and 10%, here's a huge chunk because you're coming on and you're taking as much risk as we are. There's also deferred pay. There are ways to draft contracts to have deferred pay. There are clauses you can put in, so if the company goes bankrupt, you are not personally liable. And it's also, usually the price that they get at the end is going to be much higher than what they normally get, and that's because if things do go well, if they do help you get to that milestone, you reward them. And there's just, consistently learning things yourself. And I've also seen that for us, we were a team of 2, and we raised a pretty significant round. And a lot of our investors asked, well, why do you need money? And we said, well, we want to hire. And they said, well, who are you going to hire? And we actually had
a lot of people here, so that's.
You mentioned that you thought it was very important that the early people be very flexible. And I'm wondering how, in an interview or in whatever initial experience you had with them, how can you judge such a thing?
That's a good question. I think because you have no idea how the business will end up turning, you know, and in the end you think, so flexibility is key. I think that there are probably ways you can get at it. I didn't think about how we do it currently at the offices. You'll ask questions about how they might respond to different situations. And if you can see that, a person will say, here are the 6 different ways I can see how you could attack the situation. Or if you talk to a person and ask them about their career progression or sort of how they see themselves progressing, and you see an openness in their attitude or a flexibility, there's just something I think in people's psyche when you speak with them, that you get a sense for that idea of knowing that there's a lot of ambiguity when it comes to starting a company, and if they're willing to truly engage in that, because I think people may have motivations about why they want to join a startup, whether it's to make money or be the boss or whatever, and I think that those may not be aligned with people who are flexible or just willing to just keep on morphing with the business, because it's like skiing down a mobile hill. You just need to be able to take the bumps along the way.
So one way to figure out how flexible they are is to hear them describe the same things that you've just described them, right? So you tell them that, hey, this role is a coding role, we're building the system, keep it intentional vague, then ask them how they perceive or what parts they find interesting. Ask them about the parts that they're not talking about, whether they're interested in those things. And I found it incredibly helpful to see many people gravitate towards some parts. Other people like to be sort of jack of all and try to be this inspector that's trying to investigate different things. So you can make a lot of the personality fairly clearly, at least for me.
And I'd also say in terms of flexible, it's not only flexibility in roles, but really just willing to do the grunt work alongside you, taking out the trash, because otherwise you're going to be the chief trash taker. And I think that that's part of the startup experience is everybody should be willing to just do all the dirty work in addition to kind of doing the work that they're hired for.
That's true. I mean, startup team, you really got willing to do some dirty work better. I mean, I was trying to install something, we were marking flaws together. I mean, and now one of my advisors, he walked in, he said, wow, I really should take a picture of this, And then years later, he still remembers those things. But, being flexible now, I think that's really a different issue, to my opinion. Really is someone you find you can work together with. I really, early stage, anyone I hire, I spend a great deal of time interviewing. And I think as founder or CEO, whatever achieve, you really need to motivate people to work together with. And you have the passion, you want to do this, you have that vision. But how can you motivate other people to follow it? That's really important. And really, when you're talking to the people, I enjoy one-on-one discussions with people, because then you can really see their reaction. I mean, that guy could be, very good guy, perfect guy, but it may not work together with you. And I see those people, I just let it pass through, because I don't see them when we work together. So those, I think, are really important.
Yeah, so, for us, we are lucky that we haven't had to interview anyone who isn't technical. That's really the type of person that we're interviewing at the moment. And we start off with technical questions, because if they can't catch up, if they can't keep up technically, and they can't surpass the technical questions, even just really base technical questions, then, they're really, really easy to talk through. So first we'll go through resumes, then we'll actually go through the first interview, which is usually a phone call, founder will say, you know, are you a 9-to-5 person or are you a workaholic? And we'll spin it in a negative connotation for both, so that they don't know which. So we're not biasing them toward one answer or another. They're generally a lot more honest at that point. So really just making sure that you are finding the right people who fit the company and the company profile.
One thing I wanted to mention is resourcefulness. And this is something that makes an entrepreneur, especially in an early stage startup, you know, because it's sort of across the board. You know, you want a marketing person. If you want that person to do something, and when he hits a roadblock, if he is actually able to figure out a different solution, that's incredibly helpful. And same thing with engineering. You know, my team, I've worked with people who will hit a problem, and the first thing they'll say is, "We need how do you solve this problem?" There are others who will actually, you know, figure it out, do something very different in solving the problem. They will solve it, and there's a different way to figure out resourcefulness, but I think that's definitely a very important part in an early stage team. MIT, when they're trying to get grad students, one of their criteria of deciding who's joining the PhD program, at least the computer science lab, looks at previous success. And they basically say, hey, if you've had some previous success, you've likely been resourceful in some manner or the other. And then they teach them the MIT stuff. There are different ways to figure out and find resourcefulness, but that's definitely an important trait.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I didn't say that, you know, it's resourcefulness with the ability to be curious. And so I'm hearing about this latest trend. Let me look it up and see if it has relevance or bearing to what we might be doing. Maybe this is another way we can kind of take our company off to a little bit of a tangent and sort of keep on building on top of that. But curiosity, resourcefulness makes a huge difference, because we've hired people who were like, all right, they got that, they have a pedigree, but they didn't have the flexibility or sort of the ability to say, well, here's a cheaper way of doing it. Because they wanted that budget, because they knew that they had to spend it a certain way, and there were this just time-honored ways of doing it. But we don't have much money, but you have a lot of time. There are other ways to think about doing it too.
So I have a question about making a bad hire. And this can be for anybody. And you know, when you're going through an interview, hopefully you can identify people that might not be a good cultural fit or might not be a good technical fit, but sometimes they may get through. And in retrospect, were there any signs that you missed, or was there another way that you should have done it?
Yeah, you know, I think Gamesley made some really great points around, you know, when you think about hiring, I think that there are probably, you know, there are just buckets of what to look for, right? So one is just, can they do the job? Do they have the skill set for it? The second is this idea of fit, you know, and can I enjoy working with them in a really small, sweaty place for hours on, you know, together? And then there's this third thing I'd say, sort of upside, you know. So what is in emotional intelligence? So Daniel Goleman has this book called Emotional Intelligence, and in it, he really talks about this idea of trying to get a sense for a person's upside. We know what they can do today, but what could they do tomorrow, next month, next year? And so there are ways to probably, in retrospect, that I would have asked more questions along those three buckets and been more rigorous about it, and actually exposing them, as Wei had said, to a lot more time with me, because these are not, particularly your earlier decisions, are ones where it's really hard to move on people, because it's you take it on yourself as sort of a mistake you made, and well, maybe it's not my fault, maybe it's actually my fault, not their fault. Let me see what I can do to keep on working on making this partnership or team work. So spending a lot of time, you can start getting a sense for, oh, I think that it will be a fit or it won't be a fit. Is something I spend a lot more time doing now, actually.
Well, I mean, if you, I made a ton of mistakes hiring the wrong person. I mean, but you can't avoid that. But the problem, the real issue is, if you find the wrong guy, you get rid of him as soon as possible. I use the CEO club. Everybody's statement. Anyone you want to get rid of, you regret you should get rid of him 6 months ago.
Yeah.
So basically, if you find that doesn't fit into the company culture or whatever reason, you should make that decision as soon as possible. The sooner the better, because the longer you're dragging it, affecting more of the company. I heard one guy, the moment I see him, I see there's one issue. So I say, I expect that there could be an issue in the future. He said, no, I don't think so. I said, do you mind to write it down? And he did. So he wrote down exactly the issue I was talking about. And then later, it did happen. So I didn't say anything. I just made a copy of that letter, put it in his mailbox. And suddenly he changed. Okay, it was performed great, for a couple of months. Then later, always going back to that situation. So we have to get it on by then. So whatever your first instinct, actually typically you're right. So trust your first instinct.
But what if your first instinct is to take on this person? Like, okay, I think I can work around it. I mean, that was an instinct too.
Yeah, that's right. But as soon as you find it doesn't work, you should let it go.
Yeah, so for us, we haven't made that hire because we haven't had to fire anyone yet because we're being really, really picky initially. But one of the important things to remember is that you will make that hire eventually. And hiring someone, equity is the most important item you have. It's your biggest leveraging point. So you might lose a little bit of cash and you might have to give away some severance, but just make sure that whatever contract you have with your employees, there's some sort of vesting program. So what we have is a 4-year vesting, so they get their equity over 4 years. They vest, and then they have some 1-year clips. So if they don't stay with us for 1 year, they get no equity at all. And that allows you some flexibility. It's not great for the team to have to fire someone, but if you do have to go through with a termination, you still have, if you're 6 months in, you realize they're just not the right person for the job, you still have at least the equity package. They've done some work for you, they should be salary compensated, but at least you're securing the rest of the equity so that you can make the next hire with that same
I think it's also worth adding that equity is important, but also know how you've divided your tasks, and if somebody has a lot of knowledge that's important to the company, before you start down the termination route, make sure that you actually have all of that knowledge, and that you're actually in a good position to make it a friendly and amicable departure, especially if it's in a startup context. You're probably going to work with that person down the road again. You may actually hire them later on. You may find them back to get good business contact in the future. So think about it carefully. Even though you might fire them right away, you want to make sure that you're actually, the company's okay to do that.
Also, it becomes a business decision, right? It has to be a numbers decision. Does that person is generating enough revenue for the cost that you're paying for? I heard one guy who said that I would never hire this guy, but he saved the whole project. That's why I had to put it up with him. So if you have a star guy and you have to put it up with him, you have to put it up with him.
That's true. It's sometimes company decision. Imagine, I actually let people go through, couple people. I told them I like their, active wise, I like them to take it because I just want to be fair to them. That's, everybody have a different view in terms of that. I'm just, try to compensate people for anyone I'm involved with. That I believe that's important, but there's other people who do it. That's your personal decision.
In building your team, how important is co-location? So let's say that I'm really working with this right now. For example, the technical part of your product, if you have to hire programmers, how important is it to have them in that same office with you? I'm not talking about having them in Romania, but if they're in Florida. How does telecommuting work? Does it work for technical people? Does it work for marketing people?
So I don't know about marketing people, but I think for Florida or Argentina or Romania, I think in my opinion, it's about the same thing, assuming that you and them have done it successfully in the past. And usually that's not the case. Usually you think, oh yeah, I can do it cheaper this way, and that won't work. The other thing with technical people is that talent, in my opinion, is not cheaper in India or wherever. You may be getting cheaper per head cost, but they're not that much experienced. And there's all sorts of issues. There are good pockets in there. There are very good finds, but there are also very good finds in your city. And you have to figure out how to find that. There are lots of companies that I know that have been very successful, where the philosophy is that they will let telecommuting happen, and the entire company culture is designed around that. They've got processes in place for that, and then they're saying, well, if you're going to let telecommuting happen, then we just need to find the best developers. It doesn't matter where they are, as opposed to some other definition. As far as marketing and other things,
when my first startup in semiconductor, so I can't help people work remote. Actually, I hired one salesperson in California. Even that was really difficult because you need that person to be here to understand the product and all that. But software may be different. I'm not in software business sometimes, so that maybe a different situation. Actually, we are trying to hire a vice designer. Maybe I'm very organized. This guy can be anywhere in the world. So I think that it could work out. But big corporations do this study. They studied multiple times. I used to work for a big company. They say, as soon as you see company one building, as soon as they split into two buildings, another communication breakdown right there. So again, obviously closer the better. But sometimes you have to do it. So I think that's again the judgment call.
For me, I think that it comes down to communications and your ability to have really strong communications with the people you're working with. It's very hard for me to imagine, particularly in the startup phase, that in those areas of where a lot of innovation and communication and free flow ideas have to happen, to have people very distributed can be very challenging. Right now, I run a division that has offices in London, in New York, in Chicago, in Boston, and it's very hard to communicate. And I don't know. I'm a little old-fashioned that way. So we're on Skype, we're IMing, we're video chatting, but still, there's something that's missing on that casual conversation.
Well, yeah, and at the same time, the best developers can build an entire functioning site in a weekend. So if you can find somebody of that type, again, you have to know how to manage them. It's very hard to manage them, but if you've got the experience, you can pull it off. I've seen people, so if you've got engineers in Argentina, theoretically the cost is very cheap. They're in the same time zone, right? There's a lot of different things that you can do. There are companies that intentionally choose to have engineers halfway across the world because then they can try to do stuff like support 24/7. And I don't believe in a lot of these things, but I've seen people being really happy with it, and I think it's based on experience.
I think I was particularly concerned with a developer can be not co-located, but a marketing and salesperson. I'm worried about not having that face-to-face with something that's so important that I don't know how to do.
Some of it, I think, depends on your personality and what your comfort level is. If you're paying these guys, some people want to be able to reach out and grab their shirt and say, what are you doing? And be able to do that 15 times an hour all day long. Other people are more confident in the fact that they're hiring professionals who know what they're doing and share their passion and are out there doing what they're supposed to do and are okay with that. So I think what's ideal and what we've seen in the past is a mix. It's really hard to have even technical geniuses that are halfway across the country from you because there's always going to be some level of doubt. Are they really doing what they should be doing right now? And could I be looking over their shoulder and maybe helping them to see the light or whatnot? And when you can't do that, Skype and all these different tools, they help, but it's not the same as being there at the end of the day. So ideally, if you can have a team with you, it's the best.
Yeah, just like we have this discussion, we could all do Skype online.
Right.
We
like her.
Yeah. So let's give it to Inslee, take it away.
I think that there are companies that work really, really well with a remote culture, but they build their culture around being remote, and they build their entire company around being remote. If you ever want, a headquarters, it doesn't work as well. It's very, very difficult to work with remote employees. There is, a lot of benefit of having every employee in the same office, especially when you're small, because, we make development decisions based off of the business, based off of our funding, based off of, a whole bunch of different factors, based off of our marketing. The marketers have to be able to interact with the developers, who have to interact with the sales people, who have to interact with the strategy people. luckily, we're a small team, so we're all doing everything. But when you actually have set teams, you will need a lot of interaction there. Otherwise, you're going to lose a lot of money in development because developers are going to add on extra features that the customers aren't going to want, that the marketers know that the customers don't want, and the sales know that the customers don't want, but the developers don't. And there's a lot of collaboration that happens. And unless you set up the structure of your company to work really well remotely, right from the get-go, being able to understand that you're going to hire remote employees and you're going to work consistently. There are a lot of companies part of the inlet. It depends on what you want to create as a culture. And you also don't want early employees who are remote and eventually forcing them to move to where your company's located, because that's not what you started off with. So it really depends on how you want to structure your company.
So what I would add to that is, if you want to outsource or remote it, you have to think about your trade secrets, right? So let's say if you hire a company or something in India, are you worried about they taking the code and their how do you manage the trade secret? I guess what do you think, Bob?
Kayak has a very interesting answer. They believe that you can give the dump tasks to outsourced people, and they actually actively promote that. And so to do that, these dump tasks are going to be engineering tasks in many situations. What they've done is they've got some kinds of sort of small firewalls, so you don't actually give the entire code base to people, and you let them do additional things. But I think most of these things are much more sophisticated. I would say that even though you might be outsourcing to, even within the country, even though there are good IP laws, you can never trust that. This is why to a large extent a co-founder is important. You need people that you can trust to start things off, and then you can let people mess around, right? To me, a large message right now is that if you're looking for building the right team, if you're in an early stage, trust. That's all that matters.
I think what we're all forgetting is this is a people business. People make it happen. And there are some people who can work in isolation, and there are some people that need to work in groups. But I think what you go for is serendipity. You work together, you bump into each other, you see each other. And, Ainsley looks great on Skype, but you had to set it up. And if I walk out of the room, I don't see her anymore. And it's this serendipity that causes this magic to happen. It's the bonding of the team. It's the, oh shit, I never thought of that. And it just happens. And so where I'm coming out on this is that if you're a startup team, be a team. Screw this virtual stuff. When you have the rhythm of the business down and you can segment tasks where they can be offloaded and all you have to do is manage them, maybe that's the time to consider a different model. But for God's sakes, don't start a company where you have, a friend in Buenos Aires and another one up in Edmonton, Canada, and a friend in Germany. I'm working with a guy, I can't figure out where the hell he lives. He lives in New Zealand, but he's in Germany half of the time, and his team is in India. And this is a tough deal. Don't make it any tougher than it has to be. For Christ's sake, find an incubator, live there, low rent, pay yourself nothing.
So that becomes an open source project, right?
Open source to me is no money, but
that's what I mean. It's an open source project, so everybody pitch in.
Yeah, I see your point. Sorry.
Anybody has burning questions?
I think in terms of the IT question, so the only experience we've had abroad hiring someone is we found someone who didn't want to come and visit, or someone who just wasn't the right personality fit. Just like a regular employee, if you don't trust them with your code, you're not going to hire them. So for us, if you have any issues with IT and you're worried about IT, then it's not right to work with a person abroad.
I have a question. I heard about hiring and trusting, and I really believe that every one of us needs to look at himself inside. And you mentioned that about emotional intelligence. How do you cope when you realize, or you just starting to be aware that the founder is wrong? The founder has an ego issue, and there is a lot into it, and we all human. And when you get that, you yourself can ruin the company. What do you do?
Number one, as the founder, you need to realize that you will be wrong. If you're not willing to accept that statement, then you're going to drown the company. If I work at any company in an early stage where the founder is wrong, I'm leaving. I would recommend anybody to leave. If the founder is wrong and is not willing to accept it and has ego issues. One of the first things that I try to make sure I get into everybody on my team is that I am going to be wrong, and I might not easily accept it, but if they convince me, and they're sometimes extremely surprised how easy it is for some things for them to convince me. And my job is to, as a founder, is to get feedback from potential customers, from investors, from advisors, from the channel, from everywhere. And I'm figuring it out, and employees are part of that. So, yeah.
No, the best thing to do is just fire everybody and then outsource it overseas.
And it's sometimes we were talking about fit between employee and a founder, but it could be a personality issue, and the employee is great and it's amazing. And how do you work on yourself? How do you get this awareness quickly enough and get it?
So I think that for me that there's a lot about the paradox of starting a company. The paradox of starting a company or having a vision is that you get so laser focused about your idea and get so passionate about your idea, you actually have to be a little stubborn, right? Where people say, I don't really believe you, I don't really think that this will, and you have to kind of drown out those naysayers and be incredibly convinced that you are doing the right thing, because that's the only thing that kind of propels you through those late nights. I think the paradox is that you have to be able to have that focus and vision, and at the same time recognize that you could be wrong. And so it's sort of separating that a bit and understanding what you know, which is what you have a vision for, and then also starting to accept the fact that there is plenty you don't know, and being able to recognize that. And I think that that's a really important part of the journey, to be absolutely honest with you, because the sooner you realize that, the easier it is for you to get informed and sort of continue your own journey of understanding, oh gosh, I don't know how to run a company, I don't know how to run financials, I don't know how to do marketing, I know what I want to do, I know I can see what this vision of where the company should be and what this product should be and how everyone should love it. But there's plenty, there's so much more that it takes to actually make a company happen and actually make it last beyond your head or beyond the 1 or 2 years, that having that humility is pretty important, actually. But the confidence also. If you don't have that confidence, who's going to back you? So it's a real balance for sure.
Yeah, so like a founder, you'll never be wrong. You can fail everybody, you're still right. Lots of time, I think you mentioned that well, I joined the startup before I started on my company. Because one of the guy, he actually respected him many years. When he started company, he called me at home, asked me to join him. And I did. So I quit my job, sold my house to join him, and I left him in 6 months. And because the moment I joined him, I just found there's some fundamental things I disagree with. You treat other people not nice. I like to treat people nice. That's my integrity. I believe that. And I don't. There's nothing to negotiate. That's part of me. And so although he was nice to me, but you treat other people not nice. That's tells you. Okay, I don't like to deal with those people. I don't like to work with those people. So nothing wrong with him. Okay, I just have to leave. Okay, I found that You know, that's what I tell people. You go to the startup, you go to startup, none of them are identical. Every startup different because they're dictated by the founder. Okay, every startup has different culture that's highly dictated by the founder. Okay, but you go to big corporation. Okay, you go to Valve, you go to EMC, all the big corporations, minor difference. They're almost similar. Okay, because when the company getting big enough, everything balanced, you don't see much different. Startup are different. Okay, they are very different. Cultural, highly different. So you may fail, you may not fail, okay? So I found there nothing wrong, okay? Just what fit into that culture. I mean, would you like to take what it is? So, I mean, those are the founders are wider, more open-minded, accepted first. There are people just saying, okay, this is my way, and that's the only way. So it's true that.
That brings up an
Incy?
So for, just from my opinion, we tend to hire people that we get along well with, and they tend to be people who believe in us also. And not only that, so you want employees who are going to believe in you and understand that you're doing something correctly. And also be open to debate. I know that I don't know everything. I know I'm going to need a lot of help. I have some skills in certain areas, and I have deficits in others. And I will make decisions, and I will have reasons for making decisions. For every single decision, I have a reason, and I am more than welcome to having debate either with my co-founder or with employees. So, if they think that I'm doing something and they don't understand it, they can say, our employee has said, so why are we doing this? Why did you decide to do it this way? And I will just walk through my reasoning, and usually that's good enough for that. Be open to debate, be open to, understanding other people's perspectives, because they might have the right answer and you might be wrong. And, you can convince them that you're right, or they can convince you that they're right. And, you'll usually find the correct answer with discussion. So.
Thank you.
Well, I was going to say, in the technical sense, we can screen people fairly easily to gauge what their capabilities are, specifically if we have a role in mind that they need to fill. On the interviewing side of interviewing founders, say, in your experience, what are some questions that you wish people would have asked to get a better sense of whether you guys would be able to get along, or whether there are some differences that maybe won't come out right away, but will sort of come out over time? Is there any insight there?
I would say what is really important to you, and everybody has a different judgment, different truth on that, and that has to be matched. I mean, you got to have acceptance. Some people have really strong technical. You really need that person, but you have to tolerate on some of other aspect about that person. But there's fundamentals you have to be agree on. If that doesn't agree on, I don't think you have a common platform.
I ask questions about what are your pet peeves, what happens when you get stressed out, what do I often ask questions about, during college, were you the person who pulled the late night, all-nighters, or were you the person who kind of got your work done a long time? It was just work style. So really getting at, forget about the technical side, but really how do you approach work, how do you approach communications, trying to get at, is this person a passive-aggressive person in their dealings and the like? And we've actually gotten so far as to now we're starting to do some of these online tests to get personality testing to really understand where I am as a person, and then trying to, as we hire, have other people take those tests so we can kind of see where we match or where potential areas of conflict remain.
So for me, if you're looking for a co-founder, I am heavily of the opinion that you should know them already. It's very, very difficult to start a company with someone you don't know, unless you hit it off automatically and you know you're right for one another. Questions you should be understanding or asking are, what hours do you like to work? If they like to work starting at 6 a.m. and you like to work starting at noon, it's going to be very difficult for you guys to
There, humans lie a lot. They lie for different reasons. They lie because I think there's some study that women lie to make you feel better, while guys lie to make themselves feel better. Regardless of
the
that,
problem is that they lie to themselves also.
Yeah.
Say, women or men?
Both.
Oh, okay.
When I'm talking to them, there is, I'm probing a little bit into how well and how much in sync are they with me. How well do they get what I'm talking about? And if they don't get it and they're asking me, that's fine, right? But if they are, and I've talked to a lot of people where they are, oh yeah, they're acting like they know it, but you can see it in their eyes that they got some holes in there, they're not able to communicate that to me, then I'm going to end up spending a lot of time explaining it to them, not just this issue, but any future issue. So this is my personal preference. I don't know if it's a general good idea, but I like to see, how much I'm in the same frequency with them in the conversations.
Yeah, I would also add that you really have to understand the hidden agenda of the person. You have to understand why this person is going to be on the same boat that's probably leaking it and get drowned. Why is that? I have experience, I was friends and, I had a really good, we thought I had a really good personality matching, but it didn't work out. As soon as we start doing things, it didn't work out. And I have another friend, we get on and off and say, we are great at sailing together, but I don't think I can work with this. So, you have to sort of understand what's their hidden agenda. And if you both have the same hidden agenda, then you march forward. If it is out of sync, then the boat is going to sink.
So what I'm getting is that you have to be able to gauge people's personality types kind of on the fly. That's one thing. And determine if that's compatible with your personality type. That's a key thing, especially in an early role. But as you go along and you make additional hires, that probably is less and less important because you can sort of force them into the culture that you're setting from the founder's perspective.
Oh, I would disagree. I'd actually say that it's just as important with the 200th hire as it is with the first hire to make sure that the person will be a fit. Because if it's not true to them as a personality to fit your culture, it's very hard to change personalities and attitudes about people, about work, about, and so that you might be looking for different things. You might be looking for more flexibility in the early years than you do later, but I think that it's just so, cultural fit is just so important, really.
Yeah, so my question is, so after the early stage of forming a company and starting a team, in the early stage people are, you said, people are wearing different hats on a daily basis. But once you get to, let's say, get past employee number 5, and you're looking for specific roles to fill, and specific job positions, what I'm curious about, what are the essential positions that you hire for, and in what order, and how do you think about that? And I know that, and I'd like to hear some specific examples because I know that most of you have built multiple organizations and multiple teams.
Well, you will know. When you've got that size of an organization, you will know what your biggest challenge is depending on what you want. If you believe as the CEO that you want to grow the company and the company's not growing fast enough, then, what kind of expertise do you need? Generally speaking, I would recommend you to not go after a sort of template saying, your first employee is an engineer, your second employee is going to be a business guy, your third is going to be a sales guy. Look at that, pay attention to that, but actually hire based on what you need. Because it's a lot. That's going to be your biggest cost, is the employees.
Yeah, I would hire based on what will drive the success of your company. Because in the end, when you get to companies or potential investors, they're going to want to understand that you either have that person right next to you or you're about to hire that person once they give you that money. And so very much like you said, I think it depends on what drives the success of the company. Is it a marketing organization? Is it tech? Is it sales? It's always nice to have a person who can run your numbers for you if you don't want to run your numbers.
So we just got some money from investors, and they're pushing me to hire a certain kind of person. And I've realized that we're going to fail if we hire that kind of person.
What kind of person?
What do you mean?
That's
Is it sort of position?
The investor's son.
Position or personality? Is it sort of
the
role or
position,
personality?
the background, the roles, and it's just. I mean, I can go a little bit more into, we need to hire a certain kind of person before that to get us there. As a company, we're selling to software developers. We do need, and we're a very heavy technology team right now. We do need somebody that is on the business side. But what does it mean for that person? Should we get somebody that is, a business guy who's from, say, Oracle, or from a potential target company, right? That would possibly acquire us, and then those are great ideas. I strongly believe in those ideas, but that's not what we need next. In fact, I have a feeling I'm going to be out of job if the next person that we get on board doesn't get us to the next stage so that our investors are happy. They're basically at some level they're going to try to get another CEO in. So I gotta focus at least at that stage to get to the next milestone.
Yeah, I mean,
One thing to think about with as you start to build your team is, I fully agree that it's really just kind of, who you need at the appropriate time. As soon as you get to a much larger company, you'll actually have people being team lead. But even up through, the first 15 employees, you'll have some segregation, but everyone's going to be working in a similar space. You're not going to have, here's the engineering group, here's the marketing group. And if you do, then you're starting to get that separation that you'll get with telecommunications. So, you want people to be working together, you want them to be working closely, and eventually you'll figure out what each team's need is. So as you start to expand, it really depends on what you need for each group, and not just an immediate need, but a long-term need. And that's really, we're thinking of, we'll need someone for marketing and sales. Why don't we try to get someone who can do marketing and sales together? That's something that we're thinking about now, and eventually we'll get someone just for marketing and just for sales. But we want someone who can be, the first initial person in a little group. You want someone who can end up being a team leader.
Yeah, so I mean, team building, sometimes you have to be flexible. I mean, when my investor actually invested all the company, they did a one-off conference, bring all the investors coming together, had a conference. I found it was a really great experience. And actually, I was really green that time. I didn't have much experience. One of my investors, he came up, he gave a speech. And he talked about that. I still remember very clearly today. He said, at startup, the person you really want and you believe that can make your company successful, actually that person is on the board of your company. He's absolutely right. Because most of the time, think about, you want to do something that guy can really make a difference. He's competitor side. He cannot be joined. So lots of time, yes, you're looking for that perfect person, perfect experience in my team for it. You may not get it. So you have to be flexible. Find one, really can work with, you're going into it.
And some people can make that evolution from very small startup to larger company, and some people can't. And I think that's an important thing to recognize too. And I remember feeling very guilty because there were a whole bunch of people who couldn't make it, or didn't want to make it into a more structured organization. But that's okay because that's, it's hard to anticipate how people will be able to kind of flex as the company grows in general.
Also, the different, when you're looking at potential people who will be part of your team, the different kinds of, let's say companies. There are companies that that are your competitors. There are companies that have a similar marketing strategy, similar channels. There are companies that have, sort of competing products, but doing very different kinds of functionality. And so, seeing all that and actually talking to people of those types can actually help get you a huge insight into what kind of person you need. There are a couple of companies in our industry that are taking the same kind of disruption that's going to make us successful. Talking to those kinds of people, they know they've got the experience. we might end up getting someone from a very different kind of company, but I know sort of what to ask the hire. Generally, I was talking to Chris the other day. I was thinking a question that I ask, and it's a very particular industry-specific question. And if they know what that is, then a business guy that knows this question likely is the right kind of guy that we want.
I think we're past about maybe 7 minutes more than we promised speakers, so we're going to end here. Before we go, we have the forming a company second stage in April. If you see online, it said March, but we're going to move it. In March, we're going to do the innovation, how to innovate the company series. So thank you again, and please thank our speakers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Ainsley, thank you so much. Really appreciate you hanging in there. This is a great experience.
One I'm coming.
Thank you. That was great.
Quick off and count.
Yeah,
Out 10.
That's good. That was perfect.